Welcome back to Genetics in the Paddock. I'm your host, Emily Johnston, and I'll be taking you along on my journey to learn about all things genetics in extensive livestock. Livestock genetics has always been a topic that's interested me, and now working in the genetic space, it's fascinated me even more with just how powerful of a tool it can be. And I'm surrounded by so many knowledgeable people who are so willing to share their insight, so I thought, why not capture these conversations on a podcast that we can all learn from? In this episode, I spoke with Daniel Brown, a principal scientist from the Animal Genetics and Breeding Unit in Armidale. He delves into various aspects of the sheep industry, including the development of the Breech Wrinkle trait and the impact it's had on the industry. So you want to stick around for this one. And with that, let's get into it. Thanks so much, Daniel, for coming in today. I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you.
Thanks very much for having me.
No worries. So I've heard so much about you, and I know we've had a few conversations before we've recorded this podcast, but for those of you who don't know you, can you just give me just a bit of a background, like what's your current role and what sort of things are you working on at the moment? And are there any sort of industries that you're working with, or do you kind of work with a whole variety? What's the whole spiel?
So I'm an animal geneticist, or I focus in sheep, but so I've been working here at AGBU for just about over 25 years, and all that entire time I've been working in the area of genetic evaluation and genetic improvement in sheep. I've done a little bit of work in a range of other species from here and there, but most of my time has been devoted to essentially producing breeding values for a range of traits across all sheep in Australia and in some other countries as well.
Wow, that sounds like a very extensive career. 25 years is a long time, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes and a lot of things evolve over that time too. Especially, just working in sheep alone, like there would have been so much improvement that's happened from start to finish for you.
Yeah, that is a good point. It has changed a lot. How we do things at the analytical end has changed a lot, as well as what producers are doing. So I think we've seen a great increase in adoption of what we do, so using technology to make better genetic improvement for a greater range of traits. So breeders have started to use the technology more, commercial producers are using the technology more, and we're breeding for more complex objectives with lots more traits and new things in them as we go. So it has been quite an interesting and speedy change over time.
That's really interesting, and it must be really rewarding to see, the work that you guys are putting in at the start, and then people start to adopt it as a really useful tool and help to drive them forward in their production as well. That must be awesome. But how did you get here? Like, what made you want to get into genetics? Like, where did it all start for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you would have asked me when I was studying, was I going to end up working in animal genetics, and I would have thought no. But when I was doing my undergraduate at Gatton, I actually done a little project with sheep, and it sparked my interest in more so in sheep, but also genetics. And then I come to UNE and done a PhD at UNE in wool science, and I done a fair bit of genetics work as part of that. And it sparked my interest in genetics, I guess, and the position here at AGBU came up as I was finishing, and it just sort of suited my interest, and I've never left.
Everything fell into place, and you were just like, this is probably where I'm meant to be.
Yeah, and I really enjoy what we do here, working with industry and working together to solve problems and deliver tools for people to make progress with, and it's quite a unique situation to be in as a scientist, and our speedy delivery of scientific outcomes to industry is an enjoyable part of the process.
Yeah, okay. So you said you did some work in wool science. Where did that come from? Do you have an agriculture background, or was it just something that, you were interested in for a long time? Where did that kind of start for you? Yeah,
I've always had connections to farming, and I had a property when I was younger, and my elder brothers managed and had properties, and a lot of the time they had sheep, and I always had an interest in sheep and farming, and I've always maintained that. And since completing my studies, I've had my own farming operation the whole time too. So I've really enjoyed practicing what we preach in a lot of ways, and trying to actually understand the challenges of being a farmer, but also apply what we do and make improvement at home.
Yeah, that sounds really valuable, because you're seeing it, as you said, from both perspectives as a farmer and then in your role in genetics as well. And I guess just like meshing them together would be really fascinating, because you're probably seeing things from a farming point of view that you might have not thought of from a science point of view, and vice versa as well.
Absolutely. Every year is different and brings new challenges with it, and a lot of things we're trying to breed for are actually complex and are different between different production systems, and experiencing that firsthand gives you a really good perspective on the challenges that the users of our science and technology actually have to deal with.
Okay, so you said before that you've been working in this role for 25 years. So I'm sure there's been a lot of change and a lot of light bulb moments and a lot of really fulfilling moments as well. So what are some of the highlights from your career, or what are some really impactful changes that you've seen or worked on personally? And I'm assuming you probably have taken those into your own production for your property as well. So I'm really keen to hear about, some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's been lots of things over the years, but some key ones that stick out probably are some of the new traits and new technologies that we've implemented in the evaluation. And using genomics has been a massive team effort across not only AGBU but many other organisations in a collaborative manner to use genomic information better, and that's helped the industry a lot and continues to help more people over time. I think that some of the key ones that in my mind would be the development of new traits, and we've got some good examples of developing new traits for eating quality, and also things like Breech Wrinkle. We worked collaboratively to collect data and produce new breeding values that are now quite well used by industry, an important part of their selection program to try and get balanced genetic improvement for some difficult traits as well as the key production traits. So that's been quite an enjoyable collaborative process with other researchers and also industry, and then they've been adopted, which is nice to see.
Yeah, you kind of get to see it full circle.
Correct,
so you were saying before, one of the things that you really enjoy about your job is the fact that you get to work with industry. So when you're developing these new traits, is that kind of something that you guys consult with them and kind of figure out what they need, and is that kind of how you go about, developing the Breech Wrinkle trait and the eating quality stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. It's especially when things are new, it's important to work with industry to understand the needs, understand how to develop practical traits that they can measure routinely and then use in the breeding value, and also understanding how to use them in a balanced way with other traits is really important. And often these new traits, like those two I explained, have consequences for selection. So there's antagonistic relationships people need to manage with other key production traits, often which are the things that they're paid for. So price signals in the marketplace for some of these new traits don't always appear straight away. So ram breeders have to make selection decisions with the vision of the future and breed animals that are going to suit a future need and not necessarily get paid for it straight away. And working with producers through those challenges is also a very important part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you guys go about working through them, and I suppose getting that message that it's a longer term thing? Sometimes you're not going to see, it's not an instant gratification. How do you guys work about that?
Yeah, it's hard. We try and achieve a balanced selection so they're not losing too much on the key traits that ram buyers are focusing on, but it is important to understand the future needs and try and use objective data to actually think about the importance of these traits in the longer term, and all the other programs that are going on across our industry to develop animals and systems for the future that will actually reward for these traits. So I think it's about clearly articulating the evidence that exists to support the value of these traits in the longer term.
And do you feel like because you have that connection yourself, like with a property and running sheep, and you're actually using these new traits and selecting for it, that it's easier for you to have that connection when you're talking to producers about this, because you can kind of feel it or understand it from their perspective as well, rather than just from the science or developing these traits and how they might be useful. So you kind of have that double insight there as well. Yeah,
it is. I find it's easy to have those conversations which you understand the challenges better firsthand. And we do spend a lot of time talking to producers and just listening and understanding they're seeing out in the industry, which is important as well as having your own practical understanding. But it's also, we use the data a lot that the breeders collect and answer questions using that data, provide evidence back to people, which is also important to inform the debate. It's not only about our subjective opinions as producers, it's also about the evidence that goes behind it. And I try and balance both those things because they're both important, I think, and trying to provide a balanced, objective discussion is a really important part of being a scientist, but you've got to also understand the practical side. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely good to have both.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's really interesting. I'm sure, yeah, you find it interesting from both perspectives as well, and that gives you a really well-rounded approach when you're going to, do the whichever stage of the process you're at, whether it's the data collection or giving back to evidence and understanding the practicality of it. That's
right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So going back to Breech Wrinkle, so what are some of the trends that you've seen over the years, and how have they kind of contributed to addressing the issue of fly strike, whether it's and especially talking about how the new traits developed have helped this? Yeah,
so there's been a big investment in breeding for fly strike generally, and Breech Wrinkle is just one of the traits that we use as an indicator trait. It's probably been one of the more challenging ones because it's got relationships with fleece weight and other things, but there's both favourable and unfavourable relationships between Breech Wrinkle, and I think that trends I've seen is a steady increase in the interest for industry anyway, to record Breech Wrinkle and actually collect data on it so they can breed for animals that are less predisposed to fly strike and have all the other desirable traits as well. So industry continued over time to record it more and use it in selection, and as a result we can see lots more sheep out there now that are good for a lot of traits and don't have as much wrinkle. So I think that industry have responded to those tools, and I think there's opportunity for us to do a better job and deliver more breeding values and more tools like genomic selection tools for fly strike as well to make that more efficient. So I think that the trends I've seen is more awareness, more recording and more active selection on the trait, which is desirable outcome for industry, I think.
And what sort of time period are we talking? Because I'm personally not too sure when these traits became available, but so when you're talking about trends and how you've seen it over time, genetics is quite a long-term gain and it's also permanent. But so how long, have you kind of seen these trends, and where do you feel like we're at the moment as an industry? Yeah,
good question. We started the process of collecting data, I think it was about 2009. Through the information nucleus flock at the time, we started recording wrinkle, as well as some existing research flocks with various records for wrinkle, and we put that all together and started developing a breeding value. I can't remember exactly when it was, but about 2010 or 11, I think we produced our first what we called RBV, research breeding value, and that started the process, and then industry started to record from then, and it's taken a long time to see the level of adoption that we've got now. But now I think most breeders, I don't know what the actual number would be like now, but a large proportion of the industry ram breeders are actually scoring wrinkle. And it's an important trait that is used by breeders and ram purchasers. So I think that we've come a long way, but it's taken a long time, and there's a range of other traits that are important that we've worked on over time and added to the mix, things like colour and fleece rot, cover, and there's additional traits we want to add as well. So it's sort of a constant evolution to try and provide more tools and more accurate selection for the trait of interest, which is fly strike resistance.
Yeah, okay. It sounds like there's a lot of traits that kind of play into the whole fly strike resistance. It's not just one thing that's going to fix everything, but
correct.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was actually reading one of your research papers the other day on this topic actually, and I noticed that it said the results suggested that the selection for reduced breech wrinkle should be approached with caution. Can we kind of pull that apart and understand why we should be approaching that with caution?
Well, like I said before, there's lots of favourable and unfavourable relationships between wrinkle. There's actually probably more favourable ones than unfavourable, but one of the key ones is fleece rate. Fleece weight is antagonistically related to wrinkle. So if you just go and select for plainer sheep, you'll probably breed for sheep that have less wool production generally. That's a generalisation across industry. There's lots of variation around that relationship. So what we would always recommend is balanced selection. So you need to select for all the traits that are important to you and do that in a balanced way. And one of the other challenges for wrinkle is that there's relationships between flocks or strains that are different to within flocks. So the within flock correlation is generally positive, so that if you have more wrinkle, you have more fleece weight. But it's actually the opposite when you look across strains that exist in the merino industry. So if you're selecting across flock or within flock, you get different outcomes. So you've got to understand sort of variation exists in the population you're selecting for or within, and then make sure you make balanced selection for all the traits that are important.
Okay.
So it's a bit complex to manage, but
Yeah,
it's totally
okay.
achievable with good data and good balanced selection.
Yeah, so it sounds like every flock is kind of like an individual case-by-case thing. It's not just a whole wide approach. Is that kind of what you're saying?
A little bit, yeah. You've got to think about what's important to your particular production system and what the type of animal you actually want to select for is, because if you just go and find the animals with the least wrinkle, they mightn't actually suit the type of sheep you're trying to breed for. So you've got to do that in a balanced way.
Yeah, okay. So how would you suggest someone understands a balanced approach for their particular production system?
Yeah, well, we've just been through the process of actually updating a lot of our standard merino indexes to include fly stroke resistance and breech wrinkle. So those standard indexes are the first way I think people can use those indexes and use them to select in what we see as a balanced way. They won't suit everyone, but they would suit, I think, the majority of cases. But the main thing is to look at all the important breeding values and also type of animal that you're actually selecting. So because of those differences across the flock in the type of animals, it's important that you breed the animal that's going to suit your environment and type of wool you want to breed.
Absolutely, and it sounds like indexes do just that. They kind of take the difficulty of looking at individual traits and kind of puts it all into a balanced approach that might be easier for a producer to just kind of look at and say, that's what I'm going for. I can safely say that this index will suit my production system better than looking at things individually and maybe compromising on different traits. Is that kind of where you guys see indexes playing a role?
Yeah, I think it's index is not the be all and end all. It's a starting point, and we often use it as a first level of filtering to try and find animals that seem to be balanced for that particular production system. But we often advise people to also look at all the traits that are contributing to those indexes and also look at traits that might be in the index. For example, worm resistance or eating quality might be of interest to a breeder and that mightn't be in that particular index. So it's also important to look at the animal, obviously, and make sure they're structurally suitable, and also traits like wool type, for example, that might not be in the index that might be important for some breeders to look at. So indexes are a good part, important step, but it's not the only part of the process.
Yeah, it's just a tool to help you get towards where you want to go, but it's not the be all end all. It's just a bit of a guidance tool. Is that kind of what you're...
Yeah, it's the first step. We use it to filter down to find animals that we might be interested in and then fine tune within those animals.
Yeah, okay. They sound like very useful tools for producers to be able to use, and it sounds like you guys have put in a lot of work to make those available and make them really what people need, as you said, kind of getting advice from the ground up and then developing something in it. Yeah, I'm sure those are very useful on farm for people.
It is. It's an important part of the process to develop those indexes, extensive consultation with breeders and trying to find a small number of production systems and indexes for them that suit the majority of industry. As I said, it won't suit everyone, but we do go to a lot of effort to try and make some ones that suit most of the industry. So far, we've had positive feedback from that process, so hopefully that continues.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm sure it will. It sounds like, you guys have put in a lot of work to make them what everyone needs rather than just guessing and assuming what people need. So that's really useful. So you've been kind of working in this space for quite a while, and I'm sure you've, like we've just discussed, you've seen a whole lot of trends over a whole lot of different areas. So I'm curious to ask you, what do you kind of see the future? Like, do you see any immediate opportunities or challenges, whether we're thinking short term, long term? What do you kind of see? If we had a crystal ball right now, what would you be looking at and seeing, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a range of things that I think are important on the horizon. There's a range of new traits that we know that are coming up in importance, and to me that the key ones are things like sustainability, methane production, feed intake, as well as the ability to handle variations in climate and environmental conditions across time. Like the climate is becoming more volatile, and having animals that are more resilient across time, across years and across flocks is something that I think will become more important. I also think that technology won't stop to improve, and if you look at genomics and the amount of people that are using genomics now, it's still increasing at a very fast rate. So I think producers will continue to use more technology. We'll use more technology in the evaluation, and I think that it'll become a point we'll have to reevaluate how we do that at an analytical level in our evaluation, so that we can actually keep pace. So as scientists, we're thinking about how we handle that in the longer term and keep the evaluation running in the face of lots more information. So I think the other point that is of interest to me is capturing more information out of the supply chain, and things like getting information on carcass quality and eating quality out of the supply chain will be something that will become more routine part of the evaluation, which historically in sheep hasn't been. So I can see a lot of things like that continuing to evolve and give us challenges into the future.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, there's a lot of things that we just touched on there. I think one of the biggest ones that you mentioned was climate and how that's kind of changing and how that might impact producers going into the future. So I'm guessing that means that you guys are going to have a whole lot of new traits that are probably on your mind that might come into play as breeding values or work into an index at some point to kind of fit what people might need going into the future.
Yeah, that's right. And we've started actually doing a bit of work in that space, trying to use more information available through things like the Bureau of Meteorology and other satellite data to try and inform those models and actually estimate new breeding values around resilience or ability to cope with different environments. So I can see in the future us having additional breeding values, like I say, to help breed for animals that are more resilient, let's say.
Yeah, right. Well, it sounds like the work never stops for you guys. It sounds like there's always something on the horizon that's coming up, especially with the world changing all the time, what markets need and just the climate in general and what people are looking for.
Absolutely. There's constant change.
Yeah. Well, it's good for you guys. Keeps you busy.
That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap things up. And thank you so much for sitting down with me today, Daniel. It's been really interesting hearing some of your insights, especially because you've had such an interesting career and especially just working in the sheep industry, you would have seen so much change. And I think today has really captured that. And kudos to you. It sounds like you've put in a lot of work to help drive the industry to get it to a point where, we're at with the technology and genetic evaluation systems at the moment.
Yeah, it's been an enjoyable challenge the whole way, working with producers and other colleagues in industry, just trying to develop new tools and doing it with industry and with industry using it and providing feedback and making such positive changes to their sheep. It's quite a rewarding and enjoyable process. So there's always lots of work and challenges going on, but it is quite enjoyable working with industry to solve those challenges and provide tools. So it's been enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get to see it firsthand for yourself on your own property and use it. So that's awesome. Yeah, and I'm so glad that the wool science project that you did sparked your interest for genetics, because where would we be without you at the moment, Daniel?
Yeah, it's interesting how our career evolves, but it's been enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Genetics in the Paddock with Emily, a podcast produced by the extensive livestock genetics team within New South Wales DPI. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of genetics and its impact on livestock production. If you found this episode informative and engaging, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a review. Your feedback is essential in helping me to continue to bring you valuable content on livestock genetics. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics or guests, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on social media or through email. We love hearing from our listeners and are always eager to explore the subjects that matter most to you.